Welcome to Season 3 of To Lose a Veil. I'm your host, Leslie. And again, I have my girls backing me up. That's Stephanie, Brianda, Jean, and Bonnie. This season, we're spending a lot of time interviewing and having guests come. So today, we have a few gentlemen guests, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Melvin Walters, also CEO of an organization called You Can Change.
Hey there, my name is Carlos. I am a wellness organizer. I'm working with Safe Horizon as an assistant director, and I'm a creative at my own network called Atabex Men.
Can you tell us what that means?
Atabex Men is a creation that came from a mentor of mine. It came from the urban Atabex, which is focused on emotional release work, learning about anti-patriarchy, anti-white supremacy, and anti-capitalism. In the last couple of years, I've evolved the work to focus on men's healing, and of that, Atabex Men was born. Atabex is the indigenous female fertility goddess of the Caribbean, of my island where I come from, Morica, Puerto Rico. So to honor the divine feminine, I adapted the name.
Hello, my name is Marc. I'm a IT professional in a personal and professional training and development company.
Today we're just exploring together.
Who taught you about God and what did they teach you?
Growing up as a child, didn't get a lot of information on who God concept. I think the first time I've come into any information on religion is when I was about 13 years of age, and I was in a home called St. Agnes Home School for Children, which was Catholic. And that would be the birthplace of my first experience. So, what I remember the most was standing up, sitting down, kneeling, reading prayer, Okay. And so whatever it was that they were really trying to get across at that age, for me, it was, I was just couldn't wait to get out.
Right.
Wow. But then I evolved into a much deeper and understanding of this thing we call the Creator, spirituality, the many different names it's given to much later on.
Excellent.
My first teacher was my mom. She taught me about God. We didn't really go to church. But she told me God was the Father, and to respect, and to be a good person. You have to be of service to others. I felt a deeper understanding and connection to God in my 20s when I learned the word Olodumare. Olodumare is the name of God in the Yoruban Santeria Lukumi tradition. And my godfather, Andres Rodriguez, really gave me an understanding of how to connect with God and what God means to everyone. So I learned a deeper connection about Olodumare from my godfather. But my first teacher is always my mom.
Okay.
My first teacher was my dad, and he was a staunch God denier. So he would constantly ridicule people who would even say things like, God bless you. So I don't need his blessing. So I grew up with a lot of that till I was 13.
Mm-hmm. As you have evolved, what have you let go of, and what are your current views pertaining to God?
I let go of the concept and idea that the God that they use to describe that which is undescribable is actually what they say it is. I let go of the concept and idea that God is all loving, period, all forgiving, period. All the stuff that humans have created really to make themselves feel good or not be accountable for anything. My current view, if I had to describe who I am in terms of faith, I would be described as an agnostic, not to be confused with an atheist. An atheist doesn't believe in anything. And Gnostic believe that there is something that exists, but it cannot necessarily be described, nor has it ever been described, but do believe that there is something that exists.
Interesting. Thank you.
I let go of God, the gender. I feel and resonate with God, the essence, the energy. I now explore new beliefs. I'm exploring the aspect of the God in me recognizes the God in you. Really looking at myself and other people as an experience of God. Um, in order to work, not being taking things personal, just embracing everyone for who they are. Like I believe that we are all just the expression of this divine being we call God.
Yeah. So there's definitely been a shift where I think of human beings as this very complex machine with machinery called language, and that the language of a human being allows us to take the most effective actions in life. And God is a conversation that has allowed a vast majority of people in difficult situations to deal more effectively with those situations. So I think it uses the facility of the mind to use faith as a vehicle for strength and allows people to accomplish more than they would of their own fruition. So I think it's a positive and growth inducing aspect of human conversation.
Wow. Do you think that sex is related to God? If so, what ways does it present itself?
Most definitely. Most definitely. And I think that it expresses itself according to the individual
Mhm.
in terms of their experience and their social environment. There is nothing that exists within this thing we call consciousness that's not a part of that which we can call God or the all. Everything is a part of it. But in terms of what comes out of it, that's the part where we get to choose the free will from free will.
I think God is definitely there um, in the aspect of consent, in the aspect of really agreeing to open yourself up to another. That energy that is created during the action of sex, that is God for me, and also in the process of creation, the things that happen between male and female anatomy bodies. I think that God, that aspect of creation. That's where you see God.
In creation. Yes, I do like that.
I think that God, for the most part, is not a big fan of sex. And when he is a fan, is to be fruitful and multiply for those that are chosen, and then it's do away with the rest of them. So that shows up in the Bible in many parts of the Old Testament. In particular, it's very, very detailed about who should and should not exist. And I think it gets boiled down to a case of sex is for reproduction and nothing else. And that's mostly how I see God, the God conversation relates to sex.
Okay. So the question is, who taught you about sex? And as you have evolved, what conditionings have you let go of pertaining to sex? And we'll start with you, Marc.
All right, so the first one, who taught me about sex, was mostly by observation. And I would say it was mostly my dad. We grew up with a lot of maids. They would come in and out the house, and they would often leave pregnant, and then we'd replace them. So that was sort of the initial way that things folded out. But then I think for me, how my relationship to it became having a more, what do you call it, socially normal way of interacting with sex publicly, but then a less normal way privately. So it's like balancing two mindsets, one for the public and then one person.
Wow. Okay, Carlos, can you answer the same question?
Who taught me about sex? I learned about sex through media, the internet, I guess peers. I learned unhealthy understanding of sex, I think the things that I still work now and have been, I think, well at working in my adult life is the aspect of needing it. I grew up with, like, if you're a male, you're supposed to have sex. And you're supposed to have this type of sex. It's supposed to look in this way. And those images and conversations I've always had have always been around aggression. So now I work to have a healthier relationship with sex. That it's not, this is not something I'm supposed to do, I'm supposed to get, I'm supposed to have in my life. So those are the things I'm working on. But my first teachers were the media, things that I saw on billboards, and the songs that I heard in the radio.
I agree with what he said. A lot for me. A lot of that has been the same as well. But then as I have gotten older, and my mind has evolved, in terms of sex, when it comes to me with my mate, in my mindset, I like to perceive myself as the giver, right? And this had nothing to do with domination or anything, and my mate as the receiver. But it doesn't mean in a way where she's being conquered or anything. But at the end of it all, it is a unification between the both of us. So there's no, we're equal on that plane. Just acting out a ritual. Because I don't know, that's the best way I can explain it.
Okay, I'm gonna give us a little bit of a prelude to this next question. Okay, so life force can be defined as universal energy that flows in currents within and around us and all of nature. The Sanskrit word for this energetics is called prana, the breath of life. Do you think that God is related to life force? Marc?
Well, I'm making a calculation, but if I said God is related to life force, yes. Is it related to life force in the specific way that you described? I don't know. I guess if you ascribe to what you described, it would be yes. And any type of drive for living, I think, is the energy that people get from God. Like life itself is the force of God, and and you can tap into it from different ways.
Excellent. Yeah. How about you, Carlos?
I definitely agree with that. I think that for me, the breath is the life force of God within us. And that breath is the energy of my life. I think that's one of the first things that I've learned in talking about God with Mom. She definitely used to say that a lot. God is the breath in your lung.
I agree. Well, we're dealing with it's a two-part question. And one is life, and the other is a force. But I think there's a third component that should be added into that, and I think that is consciousness. because without consciousness, none of that stuff can exist. So that's the driving vehicle. That seems to be the driving vehicle for everything that exists.
Okay, so when you say consciousness, what exactly, how would you define consciousness? And how would you say that if there was no conscious, nothing else would exist? The life force would not exist.
Right. So if we're going to use the God concept, right? When I say God concept, I'm not disputing that it doesn't exist. I'm just using that term. If we're going to use the God concept and we're going to use scripture and it goes into the beginning, it says in the beginning was the word. Right? You can't have a word without having some form of consciousness that precedes that. So anything that comes out of the imagination of God is also within the imagination of the elements that create everything else from that. From the trees to the atoms to humans and everything else. There's a consciousness within it that causes it to exist, to transform and do what it does. So I don't know how I got there, but
So I want to say something because I hear a lot of times in a lot of terms, in this ascension, new age, whatever, that people use the idea of consciousness and energy. So consciousness being the thought and energy being the force behind it.
Yes.
So that when in really going into this conversation about the divine feminine aspect, how I've come to interpret is that the male aspect of God becomes the consciousness or the thought, and the female aspect of God becomes the energy and the life force
that expresses
right. The thought.
I agree with you. Correct.
And the reason that we've been having this conversation in general as we've begun to explore these things is because we've come in a society where there seems to be something missing, and the life force and the prana holds the magnetic and the love and the humanity portion. And that is what seems to be missing. And here in the Western culture, there seems to be such a denigration of the feminine aspect of God. And as a woman, as myself growing up, I was never deemed or felt that there was a divine aspect to myself in any way, shape, or form. So that's what this whole thing is really for us to explore that, both men and female, in order to really come together and kind of balance these things within our own being and within society itself. So these questions are designed to help us get to that type of conversation. Thank you so much for being here today. We've had an amazing conversation, and we just want to wrap everything up and tell you to come back and see us again. So we're out. Have a good week.